Hello and welcome to The Magic in You, where I am here with Jimahl diFiosa, who is an author, respected elder and priest of the Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft. His interest in the occult spans many years. In 1999, and I have copies here, his first book, A Voice in the Forest, Spirit Conversations with Alexanders, became an overnight success with critics and readers alike, and is now regarded as a classic of pagan literature. And the book, the next editions here, is now into its sixth printing, which is fantastic news. These books are also followed by All the King's Children, A Human's Legacy of Alexander's, and also A Coin for the Ferryman, which is probably one of my personal favorites as well, which is about the death and life of Alexander's himself. And of course, this was followed by another book that's on my bookshelf that I can't locate at the moment, A Place at the Table, The Human Legacy of Alexander's. And also, so these four books were what Jimahl calls the Alex Chronicles, and he's gone on to write his more latest book in the 2024, which was his own memoir, 1,000 Suns at Midnight. Jimahl currently lives in the Templar city of Timor in Portugal with his husband Kerrigan Griffith, who we have chatted with. And when I asked him to describe himself, Jimahl prefers to respond saying that he is just another worker in the vineyard of life. And as I live here in South Australia, close to the Barossa Valley, known for its wines, I know what that is like. So I'm just going to bring Jimahl on board while I say, welcome, Jimahl. Thank you for talking about the magic in you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Blessed be.
Blessed be. So for people who are not familiar with you, I have gone through some of your books and a little bit of your background. Maybe we can start with how did you first get into the craft? In particular, what was the focus for Alexandrian witchcraft or Alexandrian Wicca, or BTW, all the different labels that people tend to put onto this particular tradition of witchcraft?
So I have to give you a history lesson, literally, because we have to go back 37 years, which, I'm 72 now, so it doesn't seem like a long time. But to a lot of people probably listening, it's more than the sum of their lifetime. But 37 years ago, there was no internet. I mean, there was, but it was business related. Nobody had it at home. Um, there was no no Facebook, no social media, no cell phones even. We just had landlines. And if you wanted to communicate in writing, you had to put a stamp on a letter and mail it, you know, like prehistoric by TikTok standards, right? But that's where I was. And I was interested in the occult since I was a child. I mean, yeah, you have this fascination that I think really we bring over from past lives. So there's no explanation for it. Nobody in my family was into the occult. Grew up in a very conservative background in rural Pennsylvania, a very religious family, but in the context of Christianity and born again Christianity. And but I was at the library looking up things about astral projection, tarot, spirit communication, anything occultish caught my interest from a young age. And I just knew that my spiritual path had to be something other than the traditional path my family had led me into, which was the whole born again Christian thing. But I couldn't really figure out exactly what it was. So I'm searching, but I'm searching blind because there are no online resources. There's no groups to join. I didn't know anybody. So I ended up going into a bookstore and buying a copy of Eight Sabbats for Witches by the Fowers, which was an import. So this is 1986-ish, 1987. It was very expensive because it came all the way from England. And the book just spoke to me. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know anything about Alexandrian, Gardnerian, traditional British, nothing at all. But the book just spoke to me as something that rang true. I said, this is what I want. I want this, but how do I get it? I don't know anybody. I can't go to Ireland and hunt these people down. I can't go to England. And, there's an old saying that when the student's ready, the teacher will come. And I ended up meeting a high priestess of the craft in my area. She lived a mile from me. And we connected. And she said, I'm starting a coven. And at that time, there was no connection to Alexanders or Alexandrian, so it still didn't have a label. It was just witchcraft. And she said, okay, if you're serious about this, you have to go out and buy one book, and it's 8 Sabbaths for Witches. And I had already read it like 3 times. And I said, I already have it. So everything kind of came together. And I ended up learning with her. And she became my initiator. So that was 37 years ago. That's how I started. So, eventually what you want will come to you, but sometimes the timeline is not what you want. I mean, I came to the craft relatively late in life, 35 years old, as compared to people that are probably finding it at a much younger age today.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you for sharing. And the others come in a little bit, well, later than you, but again, it was still before the internet. And that's the whole thing. It's like you basically, and we are just mentioning this before we recorded, that you got what was out there. There wasn't, you just mentioned, wasn't the Facebook groups where you can just say, hey, is anybody in my area or whatever? Or there also wasn't often the opportunity to compare traditions or paths or what there is today. And we tend to very quickly forget about that. So being an elder of the tradition and also an author, what inspired you? For people who have not read A Voice in the Forest, it sounds like it started off like an experiment, a challenge, because you mentioned you were interested in, well, you were connecting with spirit from an early age, with the Ouija board, and that often gets negative and positive comments and associations with it. But how did you first come across that idea of trying to connect with Alex himself, who passed over, if I can use my dates right, in 89?
I think it was 88.
88? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what inspired this work?
So I was when this work came about, it was 1998, so 10 years after Alex died. And there was no conscious decision or effort to say, oh, we want to use a Ouija board to talk to the spirit of Alexandros. That wasn't part of it at all. We were camping, as we did every Lammas. We would go into the forest with a group of witches, and we'd set up our campsites and do rituals in the forest. Very magical. I must have done that for 20 years before it finally wound down, because you get to the point in life where you just can't sleep on the ground anymore. It's harder to get up in the morning. But we did it for many years, and somebody had brought a Ouija board, and we said, hey, well, we're in the forest, and it's very magical, and, let's try to communicate with anything, nature spirits, for example. And so we got the Ouija board out, and we started basically experimenting with it, and the spirit comes through right away and identifies himself as Alexander's. Now, another thing to keep in perspective is that when I was initiated into the craft, there was no mention of Alexander. So I was initiated into traditional, what we would call Alexandrian witchcraft, but there was no mention of Alex. It was just traditional witchcraft. I didn't hear about Alex until he died, and somebody said, Alex died. And I said, who's Alex? And then they told me that Alexander, as my teacher showed me photographs of him because they had met. But yeah, we're just using the Ouija board and the spirit comes through. It's like, wow. I mean, it was so surreal. I mean, how can this be possible? We thought it was just sometimes when you use the Ouija board, if anybody's done it, you get jokester spirits that kind of just like, I don't know if they read your thoughts or whatever, but they impersonate people that they think that you might be interested in speaking to. But the person that knew him was there. We asked some questions that only he would know the answer to based on the relationship that he had with this one individual. And he answered correctly, and the connection was very strong and very coherent. And we wrote everything down, and then afterward we're like, what just happened? What just happened? But it was so real that we decided to continue it over a period of time, and we documented everything that happened, and eventually it became a book. I just felt that what was happening was so real that I needed to share it. I felt it was of enormous importance to people that were following a magical path, not specifically Alexandrian or traditional witchcraft, but anybody who loved the goddess. I felt that these messages were very important, and I felt that they were genuine. And so I published the book myself, only 200 copies as I remember. They were bought up really quickly. The reviews were just amazing. People started reacting to it in very personal ways. The book is almost like somebody described it as like a magical spell. As you turn the pages, the messages sort of are unfolded to the reader in a personal way so that everybody filters the information in the book differently, and it starts to speak to them in a personal level. And by the time you finish the book, you're completely transformed by what you've read, but it has very little to do even with Alex, and much less to do with me. It's just the material of the book is so deep.
Mm. No, and has been reprinted and reprinted a number of times, so it's still available today for people
Yeah.
if they're curious as to, especially those early contacts, because we're also talking about a time when and even today, there's probably more books written about um, Gerald Gardner than Alex, and in particular, Alex's work by people who actually knew him. A lot of people are talking about the Alexandrian tradition in some areas as to why it sort of, or how it differs a little bit from Gardnerian. But actually, people who knew Alex, especially in those earlier days, and have worked with him, which leads me on to the next book, and the book that I cannot find. So All the King's Children, and also A Place at the Table, where these are sort of like stories from people first who worked with Alex, or in those first generation or second generation of witches, and then A Place at the Table sort of continues on with the next generation and how that's been shaping their lives. So how did coming in contact with this form of witchcraft shaped your own life, Jimahl?
Wasn't specifically this particular form of the craft. I think it's important to, and this might be difficult for a lot of people today, because we tend to um, put labels on things and give value to one thing more than another thing, meaning in traditional craft, right? If you wear perhaps the label that says I'm Gardnerian or I was initiated Alexandrian, in some circles, it's perceived as almost like a badge of like honor. It's like graduating from Harvard or Yale or some prestigious college. And I don't think that's important, right? So when I talk about how the craft changed me, it has nothing to do with the particular school of craft that I went to. It has to do with the craft itself, which is much broader and much deeper than something that you can put a personality attachment to, if that makes sense. And so the craft has changed me in ways that religion and spirituality should change a person, whatever your spiritual path is. It's helped me to realize who I am. It's helped me to identify my purpose in life and to feel that there's a way forward, and give me the strength and the endurance and the faith, if you want to use that word, to pursue that path. And so it gives me all the tools I need to be a better version of myself every single day. It's a really backward way of answering your question, but I don't want to say that the Alexandrian craft has changed me because I think that that's misleading. It's not about a particular path, it's about spirituality in general. And spiritual development can take many different paths.
No, I certainly agree with you there because, as you said, it's just shouldn't be worn as a badge of honor because, it's okay, we get initiated into this particular tradition, but it's like, what do we do with that? What do we do with those insights? Like with anything, what do you do with your Harvard degree? Does it sit in the drawer? Do you
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
it?
It's like Francis. So, you just say, for example, you want to become an engineer, you want to build things. Say you want to build a bridge, right? So you get an engineering degree from Harvard University, or you get an engineering degree from the University of Minnesota, or from a prestigious school in the UK. You all have the education on how to build this bridge. But the proof is in the bridge that you end up building, right? You've got to build the bridge, and then we'll say which bridge is better if you have to, put a label on it. But yeah, it's not about where you come from. It's about what you do with the information and the knowledge that you're blessed with.
Mm, mm. And then you can also, I guess, especially, well, not necessarily for a tradition, because I'm sort of thinking about my own path too. It's how it sort of is there through like a sort of guiding point or an awareness when things are up and positive and when things are down. It's just like how it shapes your beliefs a little bit, especially, well, from a personal perspective, my perception of witchcraft was religious. So when I was going through darker periods or health crises, it's my belief in sort of cosmos, divinity, even the afterlife and reincarnation that, say that we go back to the goddess or we go back to the divine, that sort of takes away from a more humanistic sort of fear of death that we have when we sort of get to, or start approaching that, or thinking about our mortality as well. And I think that has sort of helped me, which I may or may not have had it sort of in my forefront of my everyday beliefs if I was following another tradition or path or even religion or have no spirituality as well. It makes me more human or a realization of my part in a bigger sort of cosmos.
Right. Well said. I think that basically we all try to reconnect to the divine in whatever way that we can. And the craft, meaning we would call it witchcraft, and even the word witchcraft is such a loaded word. I almost hate to use the word witch. And I think after living in Portugal for 3 years, I understand why there's a negative reaction to the word. If you use bruxa or witch, in Portugal, people are very, very afraid because it's misunderstood to be something very bad and very negative. That's why I like to use craft. But every religion should be a path to get you to the divine, or for you to follow. My teacher told me when I was initiated, look, I said, I want to learn spells, I want to learn magic, I want to learn all these things. And she said, yeah, fine. We'll look at all of that. But you've got to understand that the bottom line of this is self-transformation. It's all about self-transformation. It's not about what you're going to conjure up or do on the outside or how powerful you're going to imagine that you become. I mean, those things, those energies are very real, right? And as magical practitioners, we learn to use the energies of nature and the elements, and we try to connect to God and Goddess and how we visualize divinity. But really, it's about what we're doing on the inside. It's about our individual path. And I think a lot of people lose track of that.
Mm, mm. And I guess it's easy to look externally. And we're seeing it today with witchcraft now being the focus of, it's almost like a catch-all for simply spells. It's like things to bring into your life to almost be used as a band-aid as opposed to a way, a journey into So the inner world, and then maybe looking at the lens that we're looking out of. It's like changing the inner self. And then this is one of the basic magical laws out there anyway. Like attracts like. It's like, yeah, if we are from a place of peace or love, beauty, honor, then we attract that energy. If we're coming from a place of anger or loss or feeling judgmental, or that we are missing things constantly in our lives, where it's going to be sort of reinforced in the world that we look out of. At least that's what I believe as well.
Right, right.
So coming back to the tradition itself, and you have been a prolific writer with these books, the 4 books on Alex and I was going to say offspring, but the downlines from Alex. What inspired you to, because you were one of the first authors, apart from Stuart Farrar, who really started bringing the tradition out more into a wider readership, because up until that time, they only really had the Farrars. We also had the June Jones book. It's a little bit debatable of the context there, but you've continued bringing forth this knowledge base really for the tradition. So what inspired you first? Was it because of the lack, or was it just something that you felt really drawn to do?
Well, I've been very blessed by what I've learned in this tradition. My initiator, my teacher, was very generous with me, very kind. We're still very close after all these years. And so what I learned on my particular path was very important to me. It worked for me. It's a method that worked for me. And I think that the work that Alex and Maxine Sanders have done is remarkable. And especially in the period of the 70s when they really pulled the craft into the spotlight and everybody started coming to it. I mean, we are the children of that generation, and it's continuing. And as people come to this particular brand of study, witchcraft, I've met some really remarkable people, and everybody has a different story. People come to it at different points in their life. They find it meaningful. They come from different backgrounds. And I thought initially, with all the King's Children, that, Alex's legacy didn't stop in 1988 when he died, right? It didn't stop. It hasn't stopped yet. And so why not interview these people and ask them to tell their stories? And so there are, I think, 16 people interviewed, 8 priests and 8 priestesses in the first book, and they all have such different stories. They're all so beautiful and powerful. And then, 10 years pass, and sadly, a few of these people have passed. A few of these people have died. And I'm thinking, without even realizing what I was doing, I've documented the history of people that have told their story, and their history is going to continue, into perpetuity, because they were brave enough to tell me, and I shared it with the world, and then I thought, okay, let's write another book. Let's write a second book because it's still continuing. And the second book, the subtitle is "The Human Legacy of Alexanders Continues." So there are more stories from more people who have come to the craft. I just think it's really, really important that we write things down, that we document our history, because when it's gone, it's gone. And if it's not documented, it's lost. So that was the genesis of it. I just felt that people had a right to tell their stories. And I felt that I was the one that had to, just as I did with A Voice in the Forest, be the scribe that writes everything down and puts it out into the world.
Mm. And it sort of reinforces a commonality that, and this is something that, a lot of people talk about when it comes to like even trying to describe particular tradition. Yeah, there's benchmarks, but every coven, every line is a little bit different depending on where you slot it in, and also the interests at that time. And so when someone says, "Oh, I want to join, say, an Alexandrian coven or tradition," it's just like, well, what do you really want? Because though there's a few more available today that back in our day, your day, you could choose from, every coven isn't going to be identical to the other one. And even if they
Right.
come from the same initiate, they're going to be a little bit different as well.
Right. I agree.
Mm.
I think a lot of people they see they see the Alexandrian tradition almost like a brand name. Like I joked in my memoirs. I write a little bit about my thoughts on it, and I joke and I say that it's like the Versace of witchcraft. You know, it's kind of like, oh, I'm an Alexandrian. I think a lot of people say, I want to be an Alexandrian, but what does that really mean? I mean, do you even know what that means? And what makes you think it gives more weight to this tradition rather than any other way of learning? The people just they gravitate towards something because they think they want it, but they don't always understand what they're asking for. It's I think it's confusing to a lot of people. Maybe it's because seekers today have so many choices. There's so much information. How do you sort through it all? You know, if you feel an inclination toward the craft, toward the worship of the goddess, toward the old ways of magic, which way do you go? There's so many signposts pointing you every which way. I mean, it can't be easy for people, especially young people.
Yeah, so it's almost like there's too much information out there, there's too much choice. And they're getting bogged down in the detail and all the external stuff as opposed to the actual doing stuff and sort of doing the self-exploration as well. I know when I look back on my own path, there's something that sings to your soul, so to speak. And if you're not connected with your sort of inner world, well, then whatever's externally may or may not resonate on a deep level. And this is where we get people who sort of like either join a coven, regardless of its lineage or not, or a group of people, and then decide that it's not for them and they're happy being solitary. And solitary is great. It has its purpose and its place. But sometimes, especially if you've worked with other people, there's a magic, there's a different kind of magic that happens when you're
Mm,
with a group of people and when they are in a tradition or have the same sort of focus, there's that sort of takes it up a level as well,
right.
which no doubt you've experienced over the years as well. So sort of
Yeah.
coming back and looking at your journey, Jamal, is there anything that you sort of know now after 35 odd years of being a practitioner of magic and the craft that you sort of wished you knew at the beginning of your journey?
Hmm. I think that it's difficult at the end of a journey or at the end of a period of time or even from this point in time because but honestly, Francis, I haven't arrived. I don't feel that I've gotten anywhere near where I need to be in my spiritual evolution. But if I look back, it's difficult to say, okay, this shouldn't have happened, or I should have decided to do this, or I shouldn't have done that. Because every step I've taken has gotten me to where I am today. And where I am today is a place that I'm very blessed to be and I'm very happy to be. So I wouldn't go back and change anything, even the bad things that happened. And there were a lot of very bad things that happened over the last 40 years. Um, you know, just friendships that ended prematurely, you know, betrayals of people that I trusted, you know, false information that I was given that I ran with. Uh, you know, but there's been so much more good things than the negative things, and everything has moved me to where I am now. So I wouldn't change anything. I think that I would, if I could, tell my younger self not to put too much emphasis on what other people think of you or seek the approval of other people every step of the way and trust more what's happening with you. Trust your instincts. Now I know that my instincts are 100% always right. They're never going to, you're always going to, if you follow that inner voice, you're never going to go wrong. You just have to make sure that you still yourself enough to listen to it. So I think I would pay more attention to my inner voice and less attention to the noise outside of people telling me, hey, do this, you can't do this, you can't go there. But like I said, it's all part of the process. So it's hard to eliminate the process. It is what it is, and I am where I am, and I'm happy to be here.
And I think that sort of advice is very relevant for seekers today, or newbie practitioners, or anybody today. Is just like trust yourself as opposed to always seeking the answers externally. And if anything, that's what the craft has sort of opened up for me, is the sort of the confidence in sort of trusting my gut, my own sort of inner compass a little bit more. And while there may be a windy road that I've gone down and sort of had to do a little bit of, we call it bush bashing here, that's all sort of built up character and experiences that, as you said, at the time there may be the sort of like, I wish I hadn't done that. But when we look back in hindsight, it's sort of like, well, that was an experience to lead me to the person or my perception where I am today. So trying to have the sort of perfected narrow path often doesn't give you those experiences that widen you and prepare you even for life outside the craft when we're dealing with the day-to-day as well.
That's right. We don't live in a bubble. We're not in a magic bubble like Galinda and Wicked. We don't float around in the bubble. We live in the real world, right? So everything that we do affects everything else in our life, our relationships, our work, everything. We're not exclusively magical people.
And I think sometimes today people sort of think that, or they separate their magical life from their mundane life, and it's just like, but it's just one you, and it's just different aspects, and they sort of merge and flow because it's sort of like, as you said, we're working with energy, we're working with nature, and we're not separating this nature within our craft size to that nature outside of the craft.
I said to a young priestess once, recently, because she said, okay, Jimahl, what advice would you give me? You've been doing this for a while, Again, I don't think 37 years is a long time, but to her, in her 20s, it seemed like, I'm a dinosaur. She said, what advice can you give me? And I said, I'll give you one piece of advice. In the beginning, when you come to the craft, you have your mundane self, right? You have the person that goes to work, that has a mother or father, relationships with people, the one that goes grocery shopping and does the laundry. You have your life. And then you have your magical life. And this is a whole new world you discover. In the beginning, you have to identify a magical persona, something other than your mundane persona, right? Because you have to understand that there are two different energies moving through your life. But I think the work of the initiate is to eventually merge the two and realize that you're not two people, you're one person. And I think this is the lifetime work of a magician or a witch or whatever you want to call us, is to integrate yourself into a whole being. Yes, you are a magical being, right? But you're also that person that has to function in the world of form. And eventually you're going to get to the end of this physical existence, and those are going to separate for a little while. Maybe you'll come back in a different physical form, maybe not. But while you're here, you have to integrate the two completely. And that's a lifetime's work, I think. And I think that's what my teacher meant when she told me 40 years ago that this is about the art of self-transformation.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely agree with you there. And I think too, I don't know about you, but we sort of like seeing the craft, especially this sort of version of the craft. In these days and age, there's so many different interpretations, versions out there. But in particular, this sort of interpretation of the craft, of it being, to me, it's more than just a religion. It's more than just a practical, operational means to an end if I want to do spells or things like that. And in fact, I personally don't do a lot of spells. I see it more as a spiritual path, which I know can also be another loaded word. But when I talk about a spiritual path, I'm talking about sort of evolution of the soul, sort of like getting down and getting to know me, sitting in those sort of dark moments. But there is this sort of an understanding when we sit in the darkness that this is where all the wisdom comes up or comes down if we're doing sort of spiritual work as well. And then you sort of look at where you can enhance, improve, and move forward. And how I see it too, as you said, we're not in a bubble. I also see it that we are intimately connected with the planet itself, other beings, our energy ebbs and flows. And a lot of that comes back to what I do. I'm the pebble being thrown into the pond, and then my magics ripple out and affects everybody else around me.
It's true. When you live a spiritual lifestyle, when you try the best that you can do to continue, as I said, to be a better version of yourself every day, that's felt in the community around you. It's felt in the people that you know, and you see it ripple out. That's a very good metaphor for it. It it doesn't strike me as unusual when total strangers strike up conversations with me, or they want to sit with me and tell me their problems. They don't know me, but they're feeling an energy. They're feeling hopefully a calming energy, or just a receptive energy, and people are drawn to that. And I think that that's also the work of a priest or priestess of the craft, is that we need to be in the community. We need to help people when we can help people. We need to take care of our planet. We need to be cognizant of what's happening in the world, and do our best to try to change things if we can, in whatever small way we can make a change. But it's also a part of it. There's a lot of reference to the great work, and I think the great work is about inside, but it's also about what you can contribute to the outside world.
Mm-hmm. And this sort of ties in really nicely. It's one of the title of two of your books is the human legacy that Alex left behind, whether he intended it or not at the time. And then we can also move that back to Gardner as well. It's just like these are traditions or lines or in a style of witchcraft that's still being utilized and having people drawn to today. So clearly, at least in my mind, they tapped into something unique as opposed, and it's whether people want to admit it or not, it has actually influenced a lot of other practices outside of that lineage as well, that line.
Right, I agree. Yeah,
Mm.
it's a beautiful path. It really is, and it integrates nature and the natural world, and it's yeah. I can't. I recommend it highly.
But it's not for the faint-hearted because it can be challenging because we're
Oh,
looking at us. Yeah.
no, it's not an easy path, but life isn't easy, It isn't easy, and it doesn't get easier as you grow older. My mother said, getting old is not for sissies, and it's true. I mean, your problems increase, your body starts to wear down, but the inner spirit always stays young. It always stays vibrant. It always has that connection to the divine. And I think as the body kind of like starts to fall apart like an old car, the spirit gets even stronger. The connection to divinity gets even stronger. But yeah, the path is not easy. I would tell people, if you're coming to it, be serious about it and be ready to do the work, because it's not a walk in the park. No
Mm,
way.
mm. And we sort of touched on this, and there's lots of aspects to it as well. It's not just rituals and spell work. There can be ceremonial magic or high magic. There can be spirit communication. There could be a lot of things that actually people don't realize connect in with the craft, because it's then becomes, I guess, at least through the lens that I look, almost a way of life. So it's more than just something that you do every week or every fortnight or on a full moon or new moon or dark moon, whatever people are doing these days. There's this underpinning that begins to shape that lens throughout which we look at the world around us as well. So we are beginning to come towards the end of our time. Excuse me. Just getting a croaky voice now. So with coming back to your books, because you have been a prolific writer, as I said, where can people find them? Or maybe we should talk a little bit about your memoir, because that was the latest book, and it probably is the biggest book, because you've lived a very long and fruitful life, especially with the craft. So again, what inspired you to write a memoir? Because that's like putting yourself really out there into the world in your path.
Well, it was Maxine Sanders who said to me, you've written so much about Alex and about the Alexandrian tradition. You've shared all of these stories of people, priests and priestesses of this particular tradition in the two interview books, but nobody knows anything about you. What is your story? And I think that we all think we don't really have a story that anybody wants to hear about or would be interested in, because I think it's almost like the imposter syndrome. We have a tendency to minimize our own experiences. But I'm thinking, okay, well, if I was to tell a story about my life, would anybody care? And for many years, I got hung up on it's going to be boring, or people are going to say, who does he think he is that anybody would want to read a story about Jimahl diFiosa? But then I said, look, I just have to write this. And the impetus was when both my parents died. My father wanted to write a book his whole life. I never even knew it. He wanted to write his own story. And then it was too late. And I said, well, okay, I think I need to write this with the intention of nobody ever reading it. And I just have to do it for myself. And in a way, for my parents, as a tribute to not only them, but my ancestors, because they talk a lot about where I come from and where my great grandparents are from, and, my childhood. So I just wrote it all down. And then I said, why not? Why not put this out there? What's my hesitation? People are going to read it. They're not going to read it. They're going to believe it, not believe it, like it, hate it. It doesn't really matter. It was so important for me to release this into the world. I felt monumental doing it. And so that's it. I think it's a very interesting book. It is a long book, has a lot of photographs in it too. Somebody criticized it and said, he has too many pictures. Well, how can you have too many photographs? It's my freaking life. Don't tell me I have too many pictures. Flip through the pictures. But yeah, it's I'm happy that it's out there. I think I'm very proud. I'm very proud to have written it.
No, you should be. And that's also, you see, we're capturing moments in history that the way the world's going these days, we're never going to get back, and they're going to be quickly forgotten as well. Especially, those early days, it was mentioned earlier, before the internet, before this mass communication, before everything was just, a click of the button or an app on your phone, when the world was a completely different world as well. And this is why I mean, everybody, even reading books these days has changed. I still like my paper books as opposed to on the screen. I suppose that just shows that I'm close to becoming a dinosaur myself, but that's okay. I'm happy with that. But we need people to put themselves out there. We need people to sort of talk about themselves, because that again encapsulates point in history that people these days, here we are, 2025, so easy to forget. I'm looking back going, my first initiation was 25 years ago. I'm going, oh, didn't realize I was that old. It's like, where's the time gone? It's got speeding up very quickly. But coming back to your books, where can people find your books if people are interested, if people have not, and shame on them, not read A Voice in the Forest or The King's Children and A Coin for the Firmament and all the others in your memoir? Where can people find them?
The most recent versions of all the books are with Red Fawn Press. It's Red Fawn, Faun, press.com. Yeah, and so that's kind of like a platform where you can buy the book, and they're actually available print on demand, either in most of them are in paperback. Like my memoirs, I think are available in hardcover. If anybody wants to get really serious about getting my memoirs in hardcover, but they're also available online. So all you have to do is go to Red Fawn, look at what you want. It'll take you to the link where you can purchase the book, either an electronic version or a paper version, and they ship pretty quickly. So they're available. And some of the older versions are available online. You go on eBay, you go on Amazon, you're going to put in a voice in the forest, you're going to see some of the editions that came before the most recent one.
Mm.
So
And
they're out
I'll
there.
def and I'll definitely put the links below this recording as well, so people can check that out. And do you have anything coming up later this year, next year? Are you writing any more books, or have you feel that you've written everything that you want to write? And being now an esteemed elder, you just want to sort of put your feet up and have a rest. What's the life for Jimahl in the next
Um,
couple of months?
I said this in another interview that I did a few weeks ago, and people are upset about it, but I think it's true. I think that Jimahl diFiosa has written his last book. It's not because I want to go anywhere anytime soon. It's just that I think that a writer needs to know when to put the pen down. I think I've said everything I needed to say, and writing my memoirs and telling my personal story was just so important to me. I don't really think there's anything else that I need to say, because there's a lot of work that other people need to do. Other people need to write books. Um, so, I have an artist friend who wants to give me painting lessons. I've always imagined that I wanted to paint. So I think I'll find other means of artistic expression. But I think Jimahl diFiosa won't write any more books.
That's
But
both.
I'm plenty for people to read. So enjoy what's there. But most important, write your own books. Don't
Mm,
stop.
yeah.
Keep it going.
Yes, yes. Capture that moment in time. And as you said, we've all got a story within us to tell, and write it for ourselves as opposed to regardless of who
Yeah,
reads that.
when you start worrying about other people, you're gonna sabotage yourself. Just if you have something to say, write it down. If nobody reads it, if even if it's not published, the catharsis of writing it will be phenomenal.
Mm, No, that's fantastic. Well, Jamal, thank you very much for your time, for coming on. And this is basically how I started this channel, was basically I had things to say and I didn't know if anybody was going to listen to them. And how I started the series, I wanted to talk to magical people who still do stuff and what sort of inspired them as the world keeps changing, and how we can actually find the spark of the magic in you. So thank you very much for your time and talking about the magic in you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.
And blessed be.
Sabine, bye-bye.